An elemental is a mythic being that is described in occult and alchemical works from around the time of the European Renaissance, and particularly elaborated in the 16th century works of Paracelsus. According to Paracelsus and his subsequent followers, there are 4 categories of elementals, which are gnomes, undines, sylphs, and salamanders. These correspond to the 4 empedocline elements of antiquity: earth, water, air, and fire respectively. Terms employed for beings associated with alchemical elements vary by source and gloss. The Paracelsian concept of elementals draws from several much older traditions in mythology and religion. Common threads can be found in folklore, animism, and anthropomorphism. Examples of creatures, such as the pygmy, were taken from Greek mythology. The elements of earth, water, air, and fire were classed as the fundamental building blocks of nature. This system prevailed in the classical world and was highly influential in medieval natural philosophy. Although Paracelsus uses these foundations and the popular pre-existing names of elemental creatures, he is doing so to present new ideas, which expand on his own philosophical system. The homunculus is another example of a Paracelsian idea with roots in earlier alchemical, scientific, and folklore traditions. In his 16th century work, A Book on Nymphs, Sylphs, Pygmies, and Salamanders, and on the other spirits, Paracelsus identified mythological beings as belonging to one of the 4 elements. Part of the Philosophia Magna, this book was first printed in 1566 after Paracelsus' death. He wrote the book to describe the creatures that are outside the cognizance of the light of nature, how they are to be understood, what marvelous works God has created. He states that there is more bliss in describing these divine objects than in describing fencing, court etiquette, cavalry, and other worldly pursuits. The following is his archetypal being for each of the 4 elements: 4. Gnome, being of earth; undine, being of water; sylph, being of air; salamander, being of fire. The concept of elementals seems to have been conceived by Paracelsus in the 16th century, though he did not in fact use the term elemental or a German equivalent. 5. He regarded them not so much as spirits but as beings between creatures and spirits, generally being invisible to mankind, but having physical and commonly humanoid bodies, as well as eating, sleeping, and wearing clothes like humans. Paracelsus gave common names for the elemental types, as well as correct names, which he seems to have considered somewhat more proper: Richtnamen. He also referred to them by purely German terms which are roughly equivalent to water people, mountain people, and so on, using all the different forms interchangeably. His fundamental classification scheme on the first page of Tractatus 2 of the Book on Nymphs is based on where the elementals live, and he gives the following names. Elementals became popular characters in Romantic literature after Paracelsus. Even by the 17th century, elemental spirits after the Paracelsian concept appeared in works by John Dryden and in the Comte de Gabalis. 15. Alexander Pope cited Comte de Gabalis as his source for elemental lore in his 1712 poem The Rape of the Lock. The sprites of fiery termagants in flame mount up, and take a salamander's name. Soft yielding minds to water glide away, and sip, with nymphs, their elemental tea. The graver prude sinks downward to a gnome, in search of mischief still on earth to roam. The light coquettes in sylphs aloft repair, and sport and flutter in the fields of air. Alexander Pope. The Rape of the Lock, Canto 1. Farquhar's wildly popular 1811 novella Undine is one of the most influential literary examples. Another example is the DC Comics superhero team The Elementals, composed of the characters Gnome, Sylph, Salamander, and Undine. 16. Blackwood introduces an elemental in the novella The Nemesis of Fire. Elementals related to the 4 classical elements appeared in the fiction of Michael Moorcock, notably his 1972 novel Elric of Melniboné, and a variant appeared in the 1970s Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. The concept has since been expanded on in numerous other fantasy, computer and trading card games.